Hi, this is Steve Kaufman here again. I did a video a little while ago about speaking and answering the question, how do you get from this sort of passive input based learning to actually speaking? And I am a believer in a lot of input, and many people, and of course it's easy to do. It has a lot of practical advantages. You can read when you want, you can listen when you want, you can listen when you do other things, and all of that is helping the brain get used to a new language. I've said that I'm not a great fan of implicit instruction and so forth, but one thing is for sure: when you are listening and when you are reading, you don't notice everything that's going on in the language. So you need to start to notice. And I want to kind of go through, I'm going to, again, as always, I don't write these things out, so they're kind of rambling. And I talk a lot about my own experience, which might be different from the experience of others. But the way I see it is, when I start a language, it's very difficult to notice anything. You're sort of deep in this dark well, and everything is dark and unclear. And the first thing that I can start to notice is words, by listening a lot, and of course by having the text available to read, and by having, if it's a traditional system, there'll be a word list of words, and so I will gradually start to identify the words. I will start to notice the words. It may be that I'll notice that, for example, in Russian, instead of saying I have, they say to me is, u меня есть. And that'll sound strange, and I don't really quite understand what is happening from a grammatical point of view, but I know that they're saying u меня есть to mean I have. So I start to notice these basic structures, these basic components. And so for the first long while, I'm just noticing words and phrases, helped along by my reading. And if we're using LingQ, then helped along by the words and phrases that I have saved. And I'm not very sophisticated at that point in how I save different words and phrases. I might try to tag a little bit by parts of the body or something, but I tend not to do that because it's all scattered. I'm picking up little pieces here and there. And of course, the first thing that starts to happen is, the more you have already noticed and the more you understand, the more you're able to notice other things. So things that completely passed you by the first time, the second time, say in listening to something, first time you're listening just for meaning, and now the next time you're starting to listen for some of the words and phrases that you have saved. So as you are more familiar with the context, you notice more things that relate to the language. In the same way, the more of the language you've already noticed, the more additional things you can notice. I mean, we know, for example, people who have a large vocabulary can easily pick up more vocabulary just by inferring the meaning. We don't have to look everything up in the dictionary. If we have enough of a base, we start to get what the new words mean. So our vocabulary grows in this way. And I believe that what we do at LingQ with our linking, creating links and reviewing them in flashcards, as long as they come from content, that helps you notice. And then when we highlight the words in yellow, so that a word you have already saved before and you've forgotten, you see it again highlighted in yellow, it helps you notice. So now let's move on to grammar. Certainly, and I've always said, one should have a short grammar book available just to look through. The first time you look through it, you get a very vague sense of what happens in the language. You can't possibly remember the detailed descriptions of the rules and their exceptions because you don't have enough knowledge in order to notice that. You don't have enough knowledge to understand the explanations. At some point, like I'm finding now with Russian, I'm starting to focus on cases. I have a vague sense of the cases. I'm able to infer the meaning because I know enough words. And I'm always more motivated to learn more words because that's what's holding me back from understanding the content that I'm listening to and reading. So I haven't invested an awful lot of time in the grammar because it doesn't prevent me from understanding. Given that my understanding is in any case 60, 70, 80, 90%, depending on what the context is. But now I'm focusing more on grammar. So again, I'm helping myself notice by investing some time in the individual words and phrases that I'm saving, by editing the little phrase that we capture at LingQ, by tagging it as a genitive or dative case, and then reviewing them all together. And then I see the captured phrase, which reminds me, and all of this is helping. I read the grammar explanation again. I have a table so that when I see this item, I'm not sure whether it is dative or genitive or what it is in some cases. And of course, depending on whether it's masculine, feminine, and neuter, the endings can be all over the place. So I have a table that I refer to. Can't remember the table to save my life, but I go back in and I mark this as dative, and then I'll review it. And I'm not really learning it, but I'm making myself more alert, more attentive, so that I start to notice better. And so, it's a bit like, I don't know, we talk about science, that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, where new scientists are coming up with new discoveries because they already know so much about science that was developed by their predecessors, the Newtons and the other thinkers of the world. Well, it's the same in language. We're noticing more, in more detail, perhaps some more sophisticated grammatical concepts, because we have the base that we have already noticed and we already have. So the more you know, the more you can know. The more you know, the more you can learn. Now, noticing has been identified by linguists and grammar teachers as a very important part of language teaching. I discovered a blog. I did some research on the web, and the conclusions seem to be that, crashing, and I agree with this, crashing all by itself is not enough. Just reading is not going to do it. There is more that's happening there. So some people say, well, you can only sort of learn from input if you have explicit instruction in class. I don't believe that. That's not my experience. I can't take explicit instruction in class. I want to discover it on my own terms. I don't want to be in a classroom. I don't want to be in pairs, having some kind of an artificial dialogue with someone. I don't want to do those things. That's why, maybe that's just me. Now I'm very interested to have reactions from other people. I am sure that the instruction in class does help you notice things. It doesn't teach it to you. Now, another thing that helps you notice is to make mistakes. There's no question. But you don't want to be corrected too often. And you certainly don't improve right away. And I have this experience all the time. I had it just the other day in a discussion where a learner said, I ever read this book. And I said, you can't say I ever read. What do you mean? And she gave me the word in Chinese. And I said, aha, okay, I have read the book. That's all we say. We don't use that Chinese term, 曾经. We don't use that term. We just say, I have read the book. Oh, thank you very much. And then she went right back and made the same mistake again. And it's not just her. I had it with people from all different language groups. You can correct them and they go right back into making the same mistake. However, you've chipped away a little bit. You've chipped away a little bit at a pattern that they have that maybe came from their first language. You've made them a little conscious, and then you may correct them again, and they may do it in writing, and then maybe they'll see it somewhere, and at some point all of a sudden they'll notice. And because fundamentally you can't develop the language just by speaking. You can't develop the language just from within. It has to come from outside. It has to come from what you hear and what you read. But the question is, how can you improve the ability of the learner to notice what's happening? Because if you don't notice it, then you'll never be able to internalize it and use it. So I think that a big part of input-based learning is noticing. And there are a number of things that will help you notice. And those are again, get back to LingQ, those are the kinds of activities that we have built into LingQ. And there's more that we're going to bring in. I think reading out loud helps you notice. Different people may have different things that help them notice. But we can do things. Over and above this, the importance of liking the language and choosing things that are interesting and focusing on input and doing things that are easy and not getting stressed out and not worrying and all those other things, we should also do things to increase our alertness and to help us focus our attention on things that matter. And we can change that focus. Like right now I'm on to cases in Russian. I may move to verbs later on. So that was a brief discussion on this whole issue of noticing, and I look forward to hearing your opinions. Thank you.